My name is Gediminas Urbonas. Together with my partner Nomeda, we have joint artistic practice based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we work at MIT. In our work, we often engage scientists and experts from other fields. We are interested in art that works as a catalyzer for a dialogue between diverse fields of knowledge production. We raise questions about the role of art and its capacity to destabilize logic of science and suggest an alternative imagination. It is essential to rethink and reconsider themes that may sound already resolved, raise irritant questions, and interrogate uncanny matters. One of such irritant and uncanny topics for us is a swamp. Swamp is often compared with a hell. Drain the swamp is a slogan that comes from political rhetoric. However, if we take a risk and dive into a swamp, we realize that swamp is more than just a metaphor that signifies uncivilized mud or mess. Swamp unfolds as perfectly organized biosphere, as a habitat of diverse knowledges with its own stack of historic, cultural, cybernetic ontologies. It is a multifaceted model for which we can look at the complexities of our planet, at relations between living and modern living beings, and realize that swamp is an interface of Gaia. Such articulation of a swamp relates to a critical zone concept suggested by a French philosopher, Bruno Latour, and investigated at exhibition with the same name at ZKM Art and Media Center in Karlsruhe, Germany. That's now been closed for COVID, but I hope it will soon open again. Swamp is a critical zone and is understood as an endangered ecosystem that reached a critical point, as well as a critical position of the swamp researcher in regards to resource depletion and exhaustion of the environment. Humans drain swamps and extracted peat without understanding that swamps are most productive sink of carbon and methane, even 3 times surpassing capacity of rainforest or ocean algae. Scientific studies on the economic value of ecosystems identify the wetlands as the most valuable compared to lakes, forests, rivers, or oceans. Wetlands are kidneys of the planet. They collect and distribute water, filter pollutants in the environment, serve as habitats for plants and animals, as well as refuge, and historically we know also refuge for people, and also they are object for scientific and even artistic research. Our swamp research combines scientific knowledge and artistic vision. Through the Swamp School, we develop tools that invite participants to learn from the swamp through sensory experience and thus experience so-called hybrid knowledge or other ways of knowing the world. Here we raise questions about what cities, materials, technologies of the future could be and what pedagogy should be developed to meet the challenges of the future climate. With the ongoing climate change and rising water levels, when oceans sink larger areas of land, we argue that the question is to not how preserve our cities by building barriers or walls, and not how to adapt, but how to imagine a different climate. Expansions of human settlements, industrial revolutions, and modernity did their best to drain swamps. Along with the swamps, other knowledges were eliminated, the so-called indigenous epistemologies. Therefore, the Swamp School proposed a concept of amphibious pedagogy, which would help to learn from the hybridity of the swamps, from coexistence with other forms of thinking, to learn symbiotics and making world together.
Well, you know, one of the main drives for us to engage the swamp and also think of the role of artistic practice, or what we call in cultural filter. And as we know that swamps are great ecosystems that filtering all kind of polluted and toxic matter, you know. So to think of the swamps as the models, but here the question of pedagogy, you know, is like, or a question of amphibian pedagogy, you know, that is able to navigate in the different terrain, in the water and on the dry land, so to speak. So it speaks about hybridity, but but how can we learn from other species? You know, how can we think beyond the human imagination? This is crucial, of course, question as we are basically encountering climate crisis that is of inhumane proportion, right? So we have to already think beyond the human, right? And I think, you know, to look, you know, Viveros de Castro is talking about cannibal metaphysics, you know, it's kind of like as a technique to look for the eyes of other species. But I think it is important to deploy this cultural or artistic filter, you know. I cannot really, you know, even with all my capacity and interest and excitement and desire to think as the hedgehog, or to think, you know, from the point of view of the logic of the virus, for example, you know, I yet need a cultural or artistic filter, you know, to understand, you know, the logic, you know, of the jaguar. You know, I need to look at the invisible or logic of the alligator. You know, I need to look at the invisible architecture concept of Juan Downey. You know, at the invisible architecture, you know, as a concept. You know, and through that cultural filter, you know, I may understand, you know, or I may sort of like acquire the logic of the other, you know, and I think, you know, today, you know, we were also discussing about creativity, you know, but I think in this case, it is important to think not only about creativity, but to think about experimentation. I would actually be inclined to, you know, to put emphasis on experimentation, because that's exactly what, you know, art and science have in common. You know, with the goal of experimenting, making new worlds by reconfiguring bits and pieces of existing worlds.